right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Holly Maddie, and I am the president of Crossroads Community Planning. I've been retained by the Delaware County Finance Authority to provide zoning expertise as they partner with Orange Township to examine future growth along the US 23 corridor. And joining me, I have Michelle Bonney from Orange Township and Kelsey Scott from Delaware County. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Bonney, Planning and Zoning Director of Orange Township. Thank you all for tuning in. Of course, we wish that we were in different circumstances given this pandemic, but we appreciate you staying tuned and look forward to having this presentation.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Kelsey Scott here with Delaware County's Economic Development Team, also tuning in. Thank you, first and foremost, for tuning in, and I hope all of your friends and family are feeling well and healthy today. So yeah, no, whether you stumbled upon this video on your Facebook feed, or maybe you're tuning in from the Orange Township YouTube channel, or maybe you're checking this out after the meeting is already over, we are recording this video so that you can share with friends and family that might have an interest in this subject. So I'm gonna kick it off and kind of give an overview of what to expect, especially for the folks that might have just found this on their social media page. So this is a virtual commercial zoning meeting, and this is your opportunity as an Orange Township community member to give us feedback to what kind of development you would want to see specifically on the US 23 corridor in Orange Township. So first and foremost, the big thing that that the meeting is for is to really inform you of the planning efforts we being Delaware County, Ohio, and Orange Township, of our planning efforts for the Route 23 corridor. So Michelle's gonna kick us off with going over the Orange Township Comprehensive Plan, and Holly Maddie is going to go into a little bit more detail about the US 23 corridor study, which was conducted last fall. If we could go back, could we go back to the last slide there, Michelle? Sorry. So the other big part about this meeting is obviously to engage everybody, right? It's so important for us to really obtain the feedback from you, the Orange Township residents, employees, business owners, or even if you just use 23 in Orange Township to commute to and from work, or maybe you run errands there. We really want to hear from you and how you want the US 23 to look in 10, 20, 30 years. And basically what we want to do with all of this information gathering is to create proposed changes to the Orange Township zoning code along the corridor. So with that being said, we really wish that we were able to do this in person, but of course life happens and we're doing the best that we can with this virtual format. The intention is always to have an in-person public meeting here. It just all very much depends on how COVID-19 kind of unfolds and how we'll be able to how we could make that work. First and foremost, we want to make sure we can all gather safely, right? So with the circumstances, we did our best to open up in as many facets of communication as we can. I'm going to be a total broken record by the end of this presentation because I'll be going over this quite a bit. But so first and foremost, if you're tuning in live, we highly encourage you to submit any questions, feedback, comments on the chat via the Orange YouTube channel page or the Facebook page, the Orange Township Facebook page. So I'll be monitoring that all throughout the presentation. We have dedicated 5-minute breaks, so we'll be able to address those questions and comments there. And then if you're tuning in after, we have an email address that you can use to submit comments at econdevelopment@co.delaware.oh.us. And if I'm moving a little fast, all this information is on the left side of your screen. And then you could also text or call us at 614-636-3744. But ultimately, we're really encouraging anybody listening to take that survey that whose link is at the bottom there, that Survey Monkey link. So again, I'll be going through that a few times through that. If you're tuning into the Orange YouTube channel, I also put that survey on in the chat box. So again, if you're submitting any comments, highly recommend taking that survey. I would be surprised if it took 10 minutes. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Michelle to go over the Orange Township Comprehensive Plan.
Hi, thanks, Kelsey. Like I said, my name is Michelle Bonney, Planning and Zoning Director of Orange Township. And I'll just talk briefly about the Orange Township Comprehensive Land Use Plan. The biggest point is that we've had some early efforts in studying the US23 corridor. It's been quite a few years since we've started this. We implemented the Comprehensive Land Use Plan in November of 2018. We partnered with the Ohio State University's City and Regional Planning graduate students, and they put together our plan. It was approved through the Board of Trustees. And I'd like to point out the biggest part with the 8 students that were involved were the community outreach. We received over 500 surveys. It was definitely one of the biggest outreach efforts for the township, and we're really proud of this plan. So some common themes that are listed on this slide here, and I'll point them out, I'll be brief too, is the use frontage lots, the mass parking and larger uses to the rear. I think that really points out the aesthetic importance of 23. Driving down it, you want a more pleasurable experience. The second bullet point discusses the rehabilitation and reuse of existing buildings is encouraged. We have a lot of redevelopment opportunities along the corridor, and we should take full advantage of that. The third point is encourage plan office, commercial, and mixed uses. I'd like to specifically point out the mixed uses. We do not have a mixed use zoning district in place currently. That was discussed during the comprehensive plan. And I think this is a good start to have a mixed use district and identify those key areas for those multi-uses. And the last point I'd like to say is the access management practices. And that's really encouraging relationships with ODOT and creating backage roads and alleviating the traffic on 23. As we all know, that's one of the biggest concerns. And the next slide highlights some of the comments from the 500 surveys that we got. And this question was about the top interest and concerns for Orange Township. And I'll just go over some of these briefly. I think the first one there is really discussing creating a sense of place, having a destination to go to on 23 as opposed to just driving through it to get to Columbus. And those places should be for all ages and a variety of uses. That could be, in the evenings, on the weekends, during the day, whatever. And then part of that is the walkability too. I think that was pointed out a lot throughout the survey results. Having an attractive community does involve having a walkable community too. So that was pointed out in the surveys. Also mentioned in a couple of these quotes is the green space. And that also supports the aesthetics of 23. So, we need a balance of uses and enhancing specifically our commercial and industrial development, but it's important to have some green space throughout it to balance the corridor and to just to have a variety of uses and a desirable place to go and live. And also increasing the commercial uses, of course, enhances the tax revenue, which would support our school districts, because we all know that's a big part of the township. So that's all I have with the survey results. I'd be happy to discuss that more later on. If anybody has comments or questions throughout, we'll get to those at our breaks. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to kick off my portion of the open house with information about the 23 Corridor Strategic Guide that was prepared by MKSK Planning Consultants, and that was done through funding provided by a partnership between the Delaware County Finance Authority and One Delaware, which is now referred to, or was previously referred to as Delaware Now. The goal of this plan was to create a shared vision for this corridor. This included identifying key infrastructure improvements and scenarios that were developed into actionable strategies. We will get into the details of these strategies as we go through the following slides. What I do want to point out here on this slide are the boundaries of the study area. The primary boundary is Route 23 from the south side of the city of Delaware to the Delaware County, Franklin County line, which is right around Lozelle Road. I also want to point out that a larger secondary boundary was also utilized to understand how land use and transportation factors from a broader area affect Route 23 itself. So going on to the next slide, the study analyzed a number of planning aspects, such as land use, transportation, employment opportunities, workforce availability, and impediments to economic development. These maps on this slide are not meant for you to fully analyze. They're to provide a high level view to you to illustrate the types of data that were mapped in the plan. These included things such as transportation, employment, and land uses. Going on, we have the plan that identifies a number of different strategies, including making a fresh impression along Route 23 by creating a unified message or a branding package to help reimagine the place. The plan further defines action items that could be accomplished by collaborating both locally and regionally. While a number of these action items are currently being worked on by various entities, tonight we are focusing on the changes to the township zoning code. The zoning code is for those of you who don't know, is a set of regulations administered by the township that establishes land use and development standards for new construction or the reuse of existing buildings. Our team is currently working on amendments to the township zoning code that would help stimulate growth along the corridor, but in a more unified manner. Excuse me. We are looking for feedback from you on future land uses, traffic, and streetscape concepts so that we can create zoning regulations that reflect the desires of the community. So while there are a number of recommendations within the 23 strategic guide, tonight's focus will be on those related to updating the township's zoning code. So with that, I want to get started going through the different slides or different areas that we want to look at. And the first one is land use. There are going to be 3 maps that we are going to show you, and it breaks the corridor down that's within Orange Township into 3 different slides so that we can focus in on those areas. When we go through those slides, I want you to note that the color coding is not the existing use of the land right now, and it's not the existing zoning of the land right now. It is future land use. It is what we are trying to plan for and zone for the next 10 to 20 to 30 years from now. So have a broad forward thinking of that as you go forward and look at these maps. The future land uses that we're going to show you are based upon the MKSK plan, as well as feedback that we've received from some different stakeholders that we've met with, including the school district, Delaware County Regional Planning, Delaware County Engineers Office, and similar agencies. So let's get started and look at these maps. The first map that you see on your screen here is the southern area of the corridor. You'll see a blue dot at the intersection of East Powell Road and Route 23. And that is really the main gateway into the corridor. And surrounding that is a mixed use area shown in purple. And what we mean by mixed use is a walkable community with multi-story buildings that have retail on the bottom, active type uses. So coffee shop, restaurant, ice cream shop, boutique retailer, or any other type of retailer that people will walk in and out of and be active around those uses. On the second floor or even third floor, we're going to talk about height later on. But on those upper floors would be either office or residential uses, and making sure that we do have enough residential uses to help create that foot traffic along the streetscape of the retail uses. But that would be what we're centering around that gateway area. Then as you move towards the east side of the corridor, there is a rail line that runs north and south. And along that rail line in the light purple is proposed to be flex manufacturing, industrial, light industrial, warehousing, logistical type uses. And the stakeholders and everyone that we have talked to believe that's the appropriate area for those types of uses, since it is along that rail line. Along 23 itself, north of the mixed use area, you'll see red. That is your typical commercial office uses that you see along Route 23, and continuing those along 23 between the key intersections. You'll also see some brown uses. Those are your typical multifamily uses. And then you will also see some light green scattered throughout, and those are open space areas, mostly around stream corridors that have been identified through the planning process. Going on to the next slide is our next key intersection, which is Orange Road with Route 23. Again, a gateway feature that is surrounded with some commercial uses along 23, and then carrying forward the idea of the flex industrial logistic uses along the rail line on the eastern side of the border, of the corridor border. I also want to point out up at the Home Road extension, there's another gateway that is proposed. And then we're proposing a mixed use development around that intersection as well, around Mount Carmel Lewis Center Wellness Center. And that makes a really good location for a mixed use development. It is where the existing pedestrian access across 23 is, the bridge. So it would help connect a walkable community to our other residential uses on the west side of 23. Also want to point out that there's some stream riparian corridors north of that are shown as conservation development. That is an area that could be developed, protecting the stream corridors and making sure development is outside of those corridors, but still allowing the densities that would be allowed as if they were developing on the whole property itself, but protecting those sensitive areas. And then going to our next slide is our final area moving to the north of the township. And you'll see we pick up at Lewis Center Road. We have the commercial office areas around that area. And off to the west is some typical single family development that's already there today. And then off to your east, we have some multifamily uses, as well as the Olentangy High School, Elementary, Middle School campus. The main thing I really want to point out at this slide is at the corner of southeast corner of Shanahan and Route 23 is the proposed idea of another mixed use area. Again, a key intersection and gateway into the corridor and creating that walkable community. And this one makes a sense to the stakeholders and everyone we've talked to, as you can connect over to the school campus with that pedestrian access as well. So with that, I would like to open it up to any questions that we may have on land use.
Yeah, so Holly, everybody, it's Kelsey Scott from Delaware County again. We have a couple comments from Mark Freeman, actually. He's saying that frontage lots for masking is great for aesthetics, but we want to be sure that the businesses are still easily discoverable if you're driving by. And then he says, as an add-on, it's easy to see a Kroger and Menards, but not all the smaller businesses and restaurants with a similar setback.
I think that is a great comment, and I think that that's something that we definitely need to talk about when we look at the sign regulations, and also something when we get to our streetscape section, showing how different signage packages can be put together. We have heard from a lot of our stakeholders that signs are a pretty big concern along 23, making sure that they're able to identify the businesses, making sure the process for getting a sign is reasonable. And so we have heard loud and clear that we need to make sure we're writing the sign code that really benefits those businesses. So great comment. Thank you very much.
And also for Holly, if I can add, as far as the frontage lots, for Mark, I think we're going to have a couple of visuals as examples of what we're talking about. So I think that'll provide some clarity on that too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think we got another comment.
Yeah. Do you want to share that one, Michelle?
Sure. So comment made by Jordan Whistler. Do you foresee any challenges with orienting mixed-use development on such a major arterials such as the intersection of Powell Road and 23?
So yeah, another great question. And that has come up in some other experiences I've had with mixed use developments as well. And I think that the key here is making sure that those mixed use developments will probably need to stay internal to their quadrant of that intersection. Unless we want to do something like we saw up at the Lewis Center, Mount Carmel site, with a crossing up there, but logistically, I don't know how much that makes sense, and cost-wise, that would be a huge cost. So we probably would have to make sure that those sites are mixed use, but kept to their internal quadrant, if that makes sense.
Very good. And then we just got another question in from Mark Adams, suggests that perhaps to be discussed later on, but are there related plans or a need to widen 23?
So Route 23 is an ODOT road, so we would definitely need to work with ODOT on any future expansions of Route 23. But yes, there are ODOT's always looking at what needs to be done to their major thoroughfares. And Kelsey, I don't know if you know any more specifics to that.
Well, not necessarily anytime in the near future, but I know that, there could be potential, maybe not exactly widening, but there is potential for maybe incorporating turn lanes that might be able to, facilitate that congestion a little bit more. But again, our office is constantly in communication with ODOT about ways that we can kind of ease that and make it a more pleasurable route for our constituents to use. So again, I think that it's been a conversation many times, but I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with any set plans in the near future.
And it really kind of does lead right into our next section, which is transportation, and talking about making different connections with different roads to try to alleviate traffic along 23. So maybe it's a good time, and I don't know if we had more questions come in, or we could go into transportation. How do you want to?
We do have one more question that came in, if you want to address one more.
Yeah,
Holly.
Sure, that sounds great.
Sure. So we'll and just as a future reference for folks that keep commenting, we will be sure to address any comment that might go unanswered. We want to be fair to everybody's time and kind of stick with our timeline, but we are marking down all of the comments, and we will be sure to follow up if necessary for that. So Shay Reddy asks, how has the current pandemic situation affected retail, new building, taxes? Are you relaxing any guidelines or providing any support in any way to help new builds?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I'm hearing from the Delaware County side of things is that it's kind of businesses are moving forward, construction's still continuing. I do think that in general, with or without the pandemic, we need to understand what those land uses are and what the workforce availability is. That's something that kind of comes up later when we review what the stakeholders talk about. But with the pandemic itself, I'm hearing that things are going pretty well in Delaware County still. And Kelsey, you can chime in if you think differently.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Shay. So, yeah, that's just to echo Holly a bit. Our builders are still telling us to continue to expect growth in Delaware. Of course, you specifically mentioned retail. I think that that we don't know what retail is going to look like after any of this, or really what anything will look like after when this is all said and done. But obviously, we know that a lot of changes will happen. But from what we're hearing on the development side, still to expect growth in Delaware County. So we're gonna press forward and continue on. And even if the economy is affected in the ways that we're hoping it won't, but most likely will, I think that it's also good to know that we're setting plans for development now, so that it puts Orange Township in more control of how they want that to look, regardless of what the development looks like when this is all said and done.
Great, thank you. And like Kelsey said, if there's other questions that have gone unanswered, we will definitely be responding to you at a later time. We will make sure that every question gets answered.
Yes, Holly, it looks like the last few comments are pretty transportation related, so I think this is
Okay.
a good way to continue on.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's go on to transportation then. Excuse me. So the 23 strategic guide includes a detailed analysis of the 23 transportation network. Some of the quick facts to note are that the average daily traffic on the north side of 23 is approximately 36,000 near Shanahan Road and closer to 90,000 on the southern side of the study boundary. And just to clarify what ADT or average daily traffic means, that is the number of vehicles two ways passing, so each direction, at a specific point over a 24-hour period, normally measured throughout the year, so averaged out over the year. By the year 2040, it's estimated that the ADT will increase to around 45,000 around the Shanahan Road area and 100,000 on the southern side of the corridor boundary. This corridor is also very unique in that it serves two types of movements. It serves both through traffic, including truck traffic, traveling between Northwest Ohio and the Columbus region, as well as serving as a local access to a significant commercial corridor. This dual purpose corridor is unique in Central Ohio, adding another dynamic to how we properly plan for this area. One of the other things that MKSK examined is other projects in the area that may help alleviate congestion along 23. So if we look at the next slide, there are efforts such as the north east bypass and the east-west connector that over the long term might help with traffic on 23. But these projects include significant improvements and very detailed engineering that need to take place before funding could be put in place to move these projects forward. So these should not be considered an immediate solution to traffic conditions along 23. Moving on to the next slide, there are a number of short-term and long-term improvements that could be implemented along 23 itself to help reduce congestion. Some of the short-term recommendations include access management and intelligent transportation systems, which include smart technology to improve traffic flow. Connectivity is another way to alleviate traffic on a main corridor such as 23. This concept requires developers to create shared access between projects so that business patrons would not be required to enter and exit the main line road when traveling between nearby businesses. This concept can be built into the zoning regulations so that developments are required to be connected as they are constructed. Other long-term improvements include road extensions to create connections that would allow traffic to be diverted off of 23. And these long-term projects, again, would require additional engineering and funding sources. Delaware County, both the Finance Authority and the Economic Development Office are examining targeted economic development programs and incentives that could possibly assist with the construction and maintenance of these long-term projects. Sometimes these incentives can be tied to the zoning code and the development of the property, which is why it's important that we have an overall understanding of both the short and the long-term efforts as we develop the changes to the zoning code. So with that, let's talk about any transportation questions that we might have.
Oh, we got them. All right. So, Mohandas Manarahan, excuse me if I mispronounce that. Are there any plans to widen Shanahan Road?
Not that I'm aware of at this time. We will definitely take a look into what the long-term plans are on the thoroughfare plan for the county and understand what those long-term visions are, but not anything immediate that I'm aware of.
And if I could add to that, I think there's potential for that depending on the growth of Evans Farm, since that's a big connector to it. So we're really just waiting to see how that it gets developed before those type of road projects around there occur.
Sure. Great. And I think this comment from Mark Freeman, who asked a question earlier, I think is adding in regards to a previous question about widening 23, suggesting to maybe create some kind of express lane for the people who really are just trying to get through the corridor as efficiently as possible, as a suggestion. I know that there's in the 23 corridor plan, they propose some ideal cut through spots. So maybe not an express lane, but something that the township and the county might be able to control a little bit more. So that I know that was in the plan, and I thought that would help to address that for especially people like residents that can know those back roads a little better.
Yeah, great.
Okay, here's another question from Todd Dove. Seeing we currently don't have mixed use zoning code, who will be writing those requirements?
So I'll just tag to that. And so the mixed use district, we will have, it'll be defined, or the mixed use areas will be defined in the overlay district text, which will be reviewed by the zoning commission and ultimately approved by the board of trustees. Those who will be drafting the text are the woman that you're talking to today. So Holly Maddie is our consultant for that, and Michelle Bonney, myself, will be working on drafting that text to present to the Zoning Commission and to Delaware County Regional Planning Commission.
And then Mark Freeman, an inquisitive gentleman. Glad to have you, Mark. He is asking, is number 8 on that slide some kind of bypass for 23? If so, what imagine to be a high, if so, is that imagined to be a high speed limited access? So
that's labeled as a high capacity transit option, which is a long-term vision. I don't see that as anything that is currently on the books, but some kind of rail type thing along those sorts of things to try to create mass transit through the area.
Good. And then Jordan Whistler's coming back with another question too. How are pedestrian and bicycle facilities and safety being considered in your planning efforts? That's another really good question.
Yeah, so we, excuse me, with our stakeholder committee, we did have a bicycle and pedestrian access discussion with them where we did some mapping with them and identifying where those key connections need to take place. And then we're going to make sure that we incorporate those requirements into the zoning text so that they get constructed with the development. And we would encourage anybody that has ideas on pedestrian and bicycle improvements through this area to provide those comments through any of the different options that we have to get comments to us through the email or the texting or through our survey. So we would love to know where you think those improvements need to be made so that we can get those into the regulations.
Very good. And then Shay Reddy has another question. Is there an approved budget for proposed cut-through roads to connect West Orange Road to the firehouse area? If so, when is it expected to be started completed? And I can kind of take that. So when I mentioned the cut-through proposals a few minutes ago, that was just more of identified areas in the 23 corridor strategic guide that Holly touched on earlier in the presentation. So as of right now, these are all just kind of identifying the areas that it would make sense. You know, I think as we plan out this commercial overlay district and we look at the growth of Delaware County, I think that it's more of the conversation will come more to fruition as that happens with our engineer's office. But all of that is in the strategic guide as it sits now. So unfortunately, no approved budget, no set plans, but more of just here are some solutions that can help you know, think about this in the coming years as you continue to budget for the future growth of Delaware County. And with that, I'm going to make a quick note here before we move along that just as a reminder, everybody is using the chat box on the YouTube page very well, and we so appreciate that. But just as another quick note for folks that are not tuning in live, please reach out to us with comments, feedback, and questions on through our email address, econdevelopment@co.delaware.oh.us. Or you can call or text us too, 614-636-3744. You can leave a voicemail too. If I don't pick up, please leave a voicemail and I'll give you a call back. But most importantly, that survey link, that www.surveymonkey.com/r/orange23, that is going to give us our team a really great idea moving forward of how to create this overlay district and exactly what you want the 23 corridor and Orange Township to look like in the future. So with that being said, we are able to move on.
All right. So we're going to go on to the streetscapes. Streetscape is defined as the design quality of a street and its visual effect. This slide illustrates the level of streetscapes. If you want to go on to the next slide, along US 23 with existing conditions at the top and with increasing enhancements as you move to the bottom of the slide. While the streetscapes become more appealing as you increase the enhancements, there is also a cost associated with adding streetscape amenities, as well as long-term maintenance factors that must be considered when planning for future streetscapes. As we explore these requirements, we will be taking into consideration both quality of life expectations and the cost to determine the balanced streetscape approach. The middle option may end up being the best balanced approach, but we need to include all of our partners in making those decisions, and most importantly, including ODOT in that decision, because it is their right of way, and what will and will not be allowed within their right of way needs to definitely be a driving factor on what approach we take to that streetscape within that area. But not only within the right-of-way is your streetscape, but outside of the right-of-way can define the streetscape as well. And when we go on to the next slide, you will see how the buildings along the road, how their design in terms of material heights and setbacks all play a role on how the streetscape looks. So these slides show two different examples of different types of streetscapes, and they happen to be across the street from each other, so it's easy to compare and contrast. And we're going to go through these and kind of identify the different aspects of those so that we can get feedback from everyone of what they would like to see along the 23 corridor. So let's look at these pictures. The middle picture provides a street view perspective so that you can kind of get a sense of what the design looks like when you're driving down the road. The top picture gives you a straight view of the left side of the road, and the bottom picture gives you a straight view of the right side of the road. The left side of the road has two buildings. Each are set back about 70 feet from the edge of pavement from the main thoroughfare. And each building, actually one building is 2 stories in height and the other building is 3 stories in height. And then there is an access road that runs between the 2 buildings, which serves 2 functions in this particular case. First, it leads to an internal street network that provides access to these buildings and adjacent developments, ultimately helping to reduce the traffic movements on the main road. And then secondly, it breaks up the building line so that you don't have one massive building or one large wall fronting on the main road. So now let's look at the bottom slide. This is the more typical suburban setting with a large retail center set back several hundred feet from the main road with a massive parking lot located in the front of the building. So I want you guys to consider a few things as you study these pictures. Do you like seeing the taller buildings kind of with the appropriate setback ratios, which is the top slide, or do you like that more typical suburban setting with the parking, large parking lot in the front? What are your thoughts on parking? Do you like it on the front or to the like on the bottom slide, or to the side and the rear of the buildings like it is on the top slide? Do you think we need as much parking as we've asked for or required in the past? Do you think maybe new technologies may reduce our need for large parking lots? Do you think maybe we could look at shared parking requirements so that we have different users sharing the same parking lot when those users have different peak periods for their parking demands? We also want you to look at signs. We had a question earlier about signs. On the right-hand side, you see the large, tall, multi-tenant sign out at the front. Then on the other side of the road, you see just the wall signs. And then as you internally go back into that development, are wayfinding signs to get to the various businesses. So we kind of want feedback on those signs as well. And anything else with that streetscape concepts that you have input on, we'd love to hear that as well. So at this point, we'll open it up to questions.
Well, we are getting some. I don't know if Kelsey, if you're still around, you want to start off with the questions on YouTube?
Sure. So Lee Bodner is asking if the use of public transportation is part of this plan.
So it's something that was brought up at our stakeholder meeting, but it was something that we believe, and Kelsey, you can chime in if you feel differently, but we believe something would be very long down the road. Not anything that would definitely be put into our zoning text at this point in time, but just our stakeholders wanted us to be mindful that might be something that would be desirable in the future.
Yeah, Lee, I can tell you that this has been something that I would really love to see develop in the next few years. And this is public transportation specifically to help get people to work is a really big passion of mine personally, and something that I know that the commissioners would love to see happen throughout the county a bit more. So that's like a personal initiative that I'd love to take. But yeah, to again echo Holly in terms of writing it into the zoning code, maybe farther down the line. Mark Freeman says the streetscape needs to take into consideration future need for widening the roadway. And then,
I just want to chime in because that it will. So we have setback requirements that will be based upon the ultimate thoroughfare recommendation for right of way. So not what it is today, but what the ultimate is, and then the setbacks would be based off of that. So sorry.
Sure. And then to add to that comment, he said it can be green space now, but landscaped so it could be convertible with minimal expense. Don't plant large trees where we might need an additional lane.
Good comment.
Which is a fair comment. Yeah. And then Steve D asks, will there be a minimum percentage required for parking lot trees within the surface parking lots?
That is something that Michelle and I have been looking into, and something that we will definitely explore. Again, this is all decisions that will have to be made by the zoning commission and the trustees. But as a planner, I would recommend that be a best practice that we include in the zoning.
Yeah, Steve D, let us know if you would like that. Would you like to see something like that? And then Shay Reddy says the top one looks way better. Park in the back. And then Steve also says frontage toward the street, less parking, and shared lots sound great.
Good. And that's what we're getting.
That's the top image. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Mark Freeman is saying, I like the big sign from the bottom in the right image, but prefer the layout of the top image.
Okay. So I guess a follow-up on that is we could create some kind of multi-tenant sign design, but have better architectural requirements to blend with the building itself, and making sure that the height blends with the overall development, but understanding that we need to have that multi-tenant sign to make sure everybody knows where they're turning into and going behind those larger buildings.
Mm-hmm. And then Shay Reddy says, definitely peak period parking makes so much sense. You're on the right path. Restaurant and office makes the best use of both worlds. Thank you for thinking of this. And then Maureen Wagner says, the top picture looks cleaner. However, for small business, it's hard to advertise and be recognized. Current small business owners in this heavy traffic have a hard time advertising in the township.
Okay.
I could say something about that. I think when we had our stakeholder meeting in the beginning of this, we were well aware that our signage standards are very restrictive, and staff was aware of that ahead of time too. And part of this overlay district is revisiting the signage to make it easier for all businesses.
Yeah. Great. And then comment from Mark, not only including trees in the parking lots, but also specify minimum lighting requirements so people can get to their cars safely after dark.
Hello.
Oh, were you able to hear that last comment, Holly?
Yeah, is it their cars safely after dark? I think I'm looking at the comment as well. So
yeah, I'm looking at minimum lighting requirements.
Yeah, and that is definitely something that we are looking into. Again, Michelle and I have gone over some best practices. We'll continue to do that as well, and be presenting a proposal to the zoning commission that includes some lighting standards.
Very good. That's all of the comments that we have for now. I've been periodically checking the Facebook page, and I'm not seeing any comments through that channel. So if if everyone's cool with me bugging them about the different facets of communication for once more, you, of course, if you're tuning in and you haven't heard me yet, econdevelopment@co.delaware.oh.us if you have any follow-up questions or comments. And then we have that number listed as well. You can call or text that. And of course, we can't say it enough. Take that survey. Take the survey.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, I am very impressed with the feedback that we have been receiving through this, and I hope that we can continue to receive feedback through all those different facets that Kelsey just mentioned. So I want to give a quick overview of what feedback we received from our stakeholders. I alluded throughout this that we've talked to our stakeholders and kind of just wanted to go over that, the quick comments that we received from them. Our stakeholders agree that 23 needs to have a sense of place and that this could be accomplished through mixed use developments at key intersections like we've talked about throughout this process. They also helped us to better understand the types of uses that they'd like to see along 23. So that's how we kind of develop those future land use maps. And they also agreed that they like the idea of having buildings closer to the road than what are there today, but not so close to create a wall along the side of the road. So that's why we're really trying to come up with some common sense vertical development standards with appropriate setback ratios. And I also want to make sure we're looking at a ratio of the building width to the lot width to make sure that the buildings are being broken up. So the pictures that we saw on the slides before had that internal road between the two buildings to help break it up. So making sure that we have that built into our regulations in one way or another. The stakeholders also discussed some possible impediments to development. They really honed in on some transportation barriers. They're concerned about accidents, they're concerned about congestion, and also workforce transportation. So we need to make sure that we're doing what we can with zoning to address that. We can't address all of those with zoning, but there are things that we can address, such as the connectivity between developments. So we'll make sure that we focus in on where we can to address transportation issues. They also touched on workforce issues, which also came up in our conversation here earlier, I believe, making sure that the land uses appropriately reflect what the workforce availability. And with everything going on, we do need to take into effect and make sure we're looking at that going forward. They also noted that the township has some cumbersome parking and sign regulations, and that we need to have more innovative standards and a streamlined review process to help stimulate growth along Route 23. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is to be innovative and to definitely look for a streamlined review process so that things can move quickly through the development process. So I am very impressed with all the feedback we got from the public, and I'm looking forward to moving forward with this project. And I'm going to turn it back over to Kelsey to wrap up the meeting and close out.
Yes, I mean, it only makes sense that I kick it off, I wrap it up, right? So thank you so much, Holly. Great presentation. And again, amazing feedback where I'm blown away by the really great comments and questions that we've had throughout the whole thing. It makes me that much more excited to see how much follow-up feedback that we'll get on, guess what, with all of the follow-up facets of our email address and our phone number that you can call and text. And again, we can't say it enough. Please distribute that survey to anybody that you know that would have good feedback or good comments. Even in that survey, there is a comment box to add anything. So again, if you are emailing us, calling or texting us, highly encourage you to also take that survey. So we'll be collecting that feedback up until May 1st, which is a good day to remember because everybody has that date on their mind anyway. So why not piggyback off of that? I know that I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but we do still intend to have an in-person public meeting to gather feedback and do more hands-on engagement opportunities. We just want to make sure that it's safe for us to gather and to conduct that. So with that being said, our timeline is to create the overlay district draft by June 6th. So we will see. So with that, I can't thank everyone enough for tuning in, whether you were here for the duration of the whole presentation or you just listened to bits and pieces. We're so appreciative of your time. We know there's so much going on right now, and it really means a lot. And again, what we put, all of this feedback goes right back into the product that we'll deliver to you. And we want to do this for you, the Orange Township community. So with that, I will open it up to Michelle and Holly. Do you have any final thoughts before we log off and let everyone get back to their families at home?
I just want to say thank you all for taking the time to be with us tonight. I really, really appreciate it and look forward to working with you all to make 23 a great place to work and live and just be prosperous. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have anything else either. Thank you all for staying tuned in. And again, if we didn't address all the comments in the chat box, we will be sure to follow up with you. So I believe I have everybody's contacts that were chiming in. So
yeah, and also thanks all for the love. We're getting a lot of thank yous and a lot of congratulations for a good meeting. So we appreciate that, and we're excited to show you what we come up with.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.